Hey, I want to welcome you here at our Woodbury campus, those of you in Eagan, Cottage Grove, and Hastings as well. So glad you're with us today. And what I know about all of us in all of our spaces at all of our campuses is that we all have a thing. We all have a thing. And what I mean by that is that we all have a thing that we are interested in a major way, a thing that we're willing to spend extra time and extra energy and even extra money to make sure that we have it or that it happens in our lives. Most people have expensive tastes when it comes to things like cars or Starbucks drinks, expensive tastes when it comes to things like food, people that are foodies or trips that they go on. People have expensive tastes when it comes to hotels, that's their thing, or houses. Some people even have really expensive spouses, whatever. I mean, there's a lot of different ways that we find our thing that we're interested in. Now, I have a thing too, but mine aren't any of the things that I just listed. Me, on the other hand, I have caviar and champagne taste for something entirely different. The thing that I get obsessed about and spend a lot of money on, and you're going to think this is a little weird, is this right here, Bibles. I know that surprises you as a pastor that I like Bibles. I like big Bibles and I cannot lie, right? It's the second Sir Mix-a-Lot joke in 2 weeks. Now, I like expensive Bibles. In fact, this Bible right here is a very expensive Bible. It has calfskin leather. Come here and feel this leather. Come here real quick. Feel the leather and tell me what's that feel like? Buttery smooth, supple. Supple is the term I use, okay? Now, this Bible in particular, if I were to sell this Bible, I could sell it for like $300. Right? I mean, it's a very expensive Bible. I have three of these. Yeah, I actually just sold a Bible not too long ago. I bought for $300. There are only 50 of them in the whole world that were ever made. I bought it for $300 and I sold it for $550, right? Bibles are my thing. I'm a weirdo when it comes to Bibles. I'm constantly searching for this type of thing, Bibles that have amazing structure and covers. But what I know, and what you probably guess, is that the most important thing about a Bible is not the buttery smooth cover on the outside, but rather what is on the inside of it. And I don't know if you know this, but some of the more expensive Bibles that are made, that they have a unique feature to them. They have the words of Jesus in red. Have you ever seen one of these Bibles before, the red letter Bible? Anybody have any of these? Yeah, a lot of you have these red letter Bibles. And I don't know if you know this, but there's a lot of theories around how that came to be, why they put the words of Jesus in red. Some people speculate that they did this because it sort of represents the color of Jesus' blood while he was dying on the cross, which I think is a terrible theory. That's not good. That's not a good one. Other people think maybe it's because he's a central figure in the Bible, so they want to raise and elevate the color of what he said as we read through the scriptures. Other people are very pragmatic in their thinking, saying that it's just easier to find. It's just easier to find, so let's change the color. But regardless of whatever the reasoning is, or whatever the theory is, or whatever the ultimate outcome of this is, what we know is that they are a different color because Jesus' words have weight to them. We didn't change Solomon's word color. We didn't change Moses' word color. We changed Jesus' word color. And as followers of Jesus, we want them to stand out for us because we want to see what he has to say on the issues that matter most in our lives. And so we've made the words of Jesus red so that they stand out. Which is why we're doing this series called Red Letters, because one thing you know, if you've ever read anything that Jesus says, is that his words stand out. They do stand out. They stand out a lot, in fact, so that adding ink that's red just sort of highlights how strange and how odd and how weird his teachings were in the days when he was on the earth, and they are still today. That they stand out, whether they're red or not, they stand out in this world. And I've got to be honest with you, that as you read them, if you actually live out what Jesus said, if you actually do the red letters that you read, people are going to look at you as well. You're going to stand out. If you listen to and do the red letters, you're going to stand out in this world. People will shake their head at you and say to themselves, that's weird. That's weird. It's inevitable. It's going to happen because what Jesus calls us to do actually goes against the grain of what our culture tells us we should do. Now, for most people, weird is really just something that we have to go through, a stage we have to go through around our middle school years. I did, in fact. It was sort of surprising because I started off so well. Look at this. Don't hate the player, hate the game. I mean, this guy's a little stud looking like that. I mean, I started off, on point. I was a good-looking little kid. And then somewhere around 6th grade, this happened to me. And I'm not sure how it went that way. About this time, I wanted a mullet, but my dad, who was in charge of my haircuts at the time, insisted I have a flat top. And this picture actually is just before my Vanilla Ice stage, which I can't even show you. It's so ridiculous. Clearly, like a fine wine, I just keep getting better with age. It's pretty obvious, I know. Now, this inevitable adolescent weird, I can sort of deal with that reality because that's something we all go through. But to be weird on purpose, to appear weird in our world by choice, now that's sort of a separate thing altogether. And that's what we want to contemplate today, because the truth is, if you're going to do more in your life than just admire Jesus or just like Jesus, like you would like something on social media, if you are actually going to follow Jesus in this world, you're going to look a little weird, because it's going to cause you to do things that nobody else around you is doing. For example, if you really follow Jesus, if you really lean into his red letters, you're going to go out of your way to love people that no one else loves. People who, quite honestly, you want nothing from them. In fact, they've got nothing to give you in return. In fact, they may even be very difficult to love, and you're going to do it anyway because Jesus said to love your neighbor, and that's going to be really weird. You're going to forgive people that have hurt you deeply. Instead of hating your enemies and plotting how to get back at them, you're going to forgive them. And you're going to seek to do some good for them. And to the people around you, they're going to say, that's weird. Why would you do that? Why would you do that? If you really lean into the red letters of Jesus, you're going to even say no to sex outside of a marriage commitment. Instead of cashing in on your friends with benefits situation, you'll wait until you say, I do, so that God is honored and so you can receive his blessing for your life. And in our context, in our culture, that's totally weird. Stranger still, if you follow what Jesus says, you'll give lots of your hard-earned money away. You're going to invest in people that you may not even know. Instead of hoarding your money or buying something for yourself, you end up donating it to people that you will never ever meet who live on the other side of the world. You give your money so that they can have access to clean drinking water or access to hearing about Jesus. And the world around you, when you do these Jesus-like things, will say of you, that's weird. I mean, let me just state the obvious here. That's all just weird. That's weird in our world. And if you live in that way, if you live out the red letters of Jesus and listen to and do what he says, you will inevitably stand out. Pastor James, you're not doing a very good job of convincing me to follow Jesus here. I'm not sure I'm up for this kind of weird life. and you may not be, but let me just say this, and this is the truth statement that's going to guide our topic today. And if you're taking notes, I would encourage you just to write this down and take this with you. This is our big idea for today. That to experience life like few people ever experience it, you have to live life like few people ever live it. To experience life like few people ever experience it, you have to live your life in such a way that few people will ever live it. So the question then becomes, is the kind of life Jesus calls us to live worth the cost? And so today I want to show you that the weird that he is calling us to is ultimately worth it. And to do that, I've got to show you a sermon. So if you would, grab a Bible and go with me to Matthew chapter 5. Matthew chapter 5. Now, what we have at the beginning of Matthew chapter 5 is what is called the Sermon on the Mount, the Sermon on the Mount. And it's the basis for this whole red letter series. In fact, this sermon, most scholars believe, is the compilation of the teachings of Jesus that he gave to his disciples over the period of time he was here on the earth. It was sort of the culmination of his stump speeches that he was giving as he would travel from city to city, that they compiled it into one sermon. But it gives us a picture of the kind of life that he's calling us to live. And it starts in Matthew chapter 5, verse 1, sets up the scene. Verse 1 says this: "One day, as he, Jesus, saw the crowds gathering, Jesus went up on the mountainside and sat down." Now, FYI here, if a teacher or if a rabbi in the days of Jesus sat down, it was a symbolic gesture. It was sort of a symbolic move. And what it meant is that what that teacher, what that rabbi was about to say was really, 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 really important. If he sat down, you knew that what was going to come out of his mouth was significant. Unlike our very own Pastor Phil, who sits down on a stool and teaches because he's tired. It's very different. Very different. He's not here this weekend. Or else I would not be here next weekend, right? Yes, so he sat down and his disciples gathered around him, and he, Jesus, began to teach them. And this is how he starts his sermon. He starts his sermon with two words: God blesses. God blesses. Now, I want to stop here just for a second, because the first few verses in this sermon are labeled the beatitudes. And maybe you've heard about the beatitudes. What are the beatitudes? The beatitudes are named that because they are the Latin word. Beatitudes is the Latin word for the word blessing. And this word blessing is going to come up time and time again in the introduction to Jesus's sermon here, because he's opening his sermon in a very specific way. He wants to reveal the blessings. He wants to reveal the benefits for following him. That God actually rewards those who try to live out Jesus's red letters. Jesus wants to know that there is a benefit to following him. And so in order to figure out what this benefit actually is, to figure out what Jesus is talking about here, we've got to understand what this word that is repeated 9 times in the next 9 verses, what it actually means. What is God doing? What is it all about when God blesses? Now, blesses sort of sounds like one of those religious-y, churchy words that people use to fill in the gap when they don't know what to say. I'm so blessed. I'm just blessed. Blessed to be a blessing. Hashtag blessed, right? It's like, what does that even mean? I don't even know what you're talking about there. But Jesus actually was using it very specifically, because in the original languages of the New Testament, which is Greek, the word that he is using, this word that's used 9 times, is the word makarios. Makarios, it means blessed. And it's a very, very, very important word in the Bible times. In fact, anybody who would have heard this introduction to this sermon, and Jesus used this word makarios over and over again, anybody who would have heard that would have known the exact point he was trying to make in the introduction to this sermon, because in the ancient Near Eastern world, the Greek island of Cyprus was called, it had a sort of an alias, it had another name called the Makarios Island, or the Blessed Isle. It was known as the Makarios Island because those who lived on that island, on the island of Cyprus, never actually had to leave the island of Cyprus. They never had to leave the shores of the island in order to get anything they needed, because everything they needed to be content was right there in that place. They had everything, natural resources, minerals, fruits, flowers, beauty beyond imagination, beauty beyond belief. I mean, this was a great place to be because the island was self-contained and it was self-sufficient, so that no one who lived there ever had to want for or long for or search for anything anywhere else. And so Jesus chooses this word makarios to describe those who try to follow his red letters very closely. He uses this word makarios to give an image, to evoke a picture in people's mind of what it means to follow his teachings very deliberately in their life. He wanted to use this word because he wanted to know what you would get in return for doing this. And he promises that we who live out his red letters, that we will experience a holy happiness in our lives. That by living out his teachings, we will experience this sacred delight, this sort of out of this world kind of gladness. That what we need in our life will ultimately be found in him. Makarios. But this word that he's giving us for blessed, for happy, is more than just a temporary happiness, though. You know, I'm happy when someone buys me a drink at Dunn Brothers. Anytime. Right? I'm happy when it's sunny outside, right? I'm really happy when that happens. I'm happy when the Vikings win. I'm happy when my puppy poops outside for a change.
Happy, 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 happy. Everybody happy, happy, happy.
Yes. When he poops outside, I'm happy, happy, happy. I'm not happy, happy, happy very often, unfortunately. You know, I'm happy when the stars align to my benefit. But the problem with happiness is that it can be so circumstantial sometimes. It can be so temporary for us. But that's not the makarios that Jesus is talking about here. He's talking about a happiness, a blessedness that goes beyond circumstances. And this situation is something that we can only get from knowing and following Christ. We only get it when we live out the red letters of Christ. And when we do, he becomes our Cyprus island. He becomes all we need. He becomes all we want when it comes to finding what we are wanting in this world. When it comes to living the life we're supposed to live. The red letter truth is to experience life like few people ever experience it. To experience the makarios kind of life. The fulfilled, self-sustaining kind of life. To experience that kind of life, we have to live life like few people ever live it. So how are we supposed to live it? What does that life look like? And now this is the not so easy part of the story. Because to get God's blessing, to get his benefits, to get his rewards, we have to start marching to the beat of a different drum. To get the benefit, the blessing that Jesus is talking about here, we have to start living in a countercultural way. We have to go red letter weird and then never go back. And so Jesus gives us an overview of what this sort of life looks like. Matthew chapter 5, verse 3. He has some standout statements that he wants us to see. Verse 3 says this: God blesses those who are poor and realize their need for him, for the kingdom of heaven is theirs. Now, just reading this from a cultural context, this sounds weird. God blesses. Happy are those who are poor. And just so you know, Jesus isn't talking about money here at all. In fact, the literal translation of this verse is Jesus is saying that blessed or happy, God blesses those who are poor in spirit. That in order to be blessed, you've got to be someone who goes before God in a state that is spiritually bankrupt. You go before God with a debt of sin that is too great that you can never pay it back. That the happy people on this planet are those who reach into their spiritual pants pockets and turn them inside out, and all they find is just a little bit of lint. That those people are the happiest because Jesus says those people are the ones who know that they need mercy and they need forgiveness, that they need a crutch to get through this life, that they need a savior in their life. Friends, you'll never be happy, never ever be happy until you begin to recognize that you are spiritually busted, broke. And more than anything else, you need God in your life. Jesus says that's the type of person who's really blessed, who's really happy. But he doesn't stop there. In verse 4, he says, God blesses those who mourn, for they will be comforted. What does that mean? God blesses those who mourn, who cry. What is that all about? Well, Jesus says God blesses those individuals who are able to catch a glimpse and contemplate how sinful they really are. That God blesses those who come before him with sort of this soft, remorseful heart and say, okay, God, here's who I am. I'm broken, I'm sinful, and I'm in desperate need of you. And Jesus says that those individuals that come to God with a mournful spirit about what they've done don't find rejection from God. By opening yourself to God, you don't find him swatting you away, but rather bringing you in and embracing you. That this mourning results in your ultimate comfort from God. He goes on to say in verse 5, he says, God blesses those who are humble, for they will inherit the whole earth, which is probably the most counterintuitive statement in our culture. Because the humble do not win the game in our context. The humble do not win. Those that are strong and fast and better and smarter, those are the ones who inherit the earth. It sounds so weird. But Jesus says it's the humble. And this word humble is actually a very interesting word that he picked to use here. In other translations, it's translated meek. And we don't like the term meek because it sounds like weak and leak. And we don't like either one of those things, right? Weak, meek. But that's not what this word meek, humble, is really all about. This meek doesn't equal weak or wimpy or to be Barney Fife-like. It actually refers to a person who surrenders control of their life to God. In fact, this word meek was used over and over again in the ancient Near Eastern context to describe a thoroughbred type of horse that was under bridle. That the power was there. The power was always there to take off and run, but it was under control of the rider. And this is the kind of person who says, you know what, God, I'm done trying to run my own life. I'm done trying to run this way and that way. I yield myself to you. You see, this sort of thinking is actually the opposite of self-help. In fact, if self-help was the answer, God would have given us all gift cards to Amazon so that we could have downloaded self-help Kindle books and then climb out of whatever mess we find ourselves in. But that's not the answer. It's relinquishing control to the one who knows how to run our life better than we do. But Jesus doesn't stop there. He keeps going in verse 6. God blesses those who hunger and thirst for justice, for they will be satisfied. Jesus says the satisfied are not those who crave and accumulate lots of money and lots of power and lots of popularity and lots of success. No, Jesus says the satisfied, the filled up, are those who pursue justice, those who pursue rightness. Rightness, meaning being right with God and being right with other people. These are the kind of people who go out of their way to right whatever wrong they see in the world. Jesus says those people are the ones who are truly happy in that pursuit. He goes on, verse 7, God blesses those who are merciful, for they will be shown mercy. The merciful are blessed with mercy. Who are the merciful? The merciful are individuals who respond to misery wherever they see it. They see hurt people and they seek to understand whatever that hurt is, where it came from. They sometimes even feel the hurt that other people are going through, and then they make a move to help those people. And when the hurt people are trying to hurt those people, which is what hurting people do, they hurt others, the merciful respond not with revenge, but with forgiveness. It's weird, no doubt about it. Verse 8, God blesses those whose hearts are pure, for they will see God. Jesus is saying what he's saying here is that happy people are the ones who are real, who are authentic. Not just before other people, but before God as well. That the happy people in this world are the ones who have the courage to actually take off the mask they are wearing and quit grandstanding and quit play acting and quit posting pictures that are better than your life actually is. That the happy people are the ones who can get real when they get before God. Those are the people who actually get to see God for who He is, because they allowed God to see them for who they really are. And then lastly, verse 9, Jesus says, God blesses those who work for peace, for they will be called the children of God. Now, he's not saying that you need to sell all your possessions and head out to join the Peace Corps or go overseas and work and try to get peace that way. No, it's much simpler than that. He's saying that those who are happiest in this world are people who cooperate instead of compete, who build bridges instead of fight one another. These weird people are those who work hard to drain the moats and tear down the walls and to put down the swords and bring people together. And theirs is an exhausting but rewarding work. I mean, this is just a summary of what Jesus said. This is his introduction to his sermon. But you get to see the kind of life that he's describing. You get to see sort of the destination that he's leading us to as we follow him. And what I know about many of you at all of our campuses, that there are so many of you who are doing your best to live out the red letters described in Matthew 5. That you've committed to this process. You've committed to becoming more Jesus-like in your life. And you are weird and you know it. You know it because you go against the grain of what's going on around you. You say no when most say yes. You say yes when most are saying no. Which is why, for those of you attempting to live out the red letters, which is why on behalf of Jesus, I want to say from my heart, way to go, weirdo. Way to go, weirdo. I know that sounds sort of funny, but it's really not. You need to be recognized for what you are attempting to do. To not just listen to, but do the red letters that Jesus gave us. Because there are many, so many of you that have passed up business deals and money coming in because you knew that the deal wasn't right. And you knew that by saying yes to that situation, that even though maybe nobody else would know, you knew it wouldn't honor God. And you did that. Way to go, weirdo. There are many of you. I know there are many of you. Because we have like 1,000 people who sponsor kids through World Vision. There are many of you who give dozens and dozens and dozens and even hundreds of dollars every month to help people that you will never probably ever meet, but who are in desperate need of your assistance. You help them through your finances, and you go into your accountant every year and they're like, why are you doing this? You're so weird. But you know why you're doing this. You know why. So many of you preparing for marriage, high schoolers, preparing for the rest of your life, you have committed to a life of purity. That when other people and other individuals around you are saying yes to moving in, saying yes to having sex outside of marriage, when they're saying yes, you're saying no. Not because you're a prude, not because you don't want to go down this route, but because you know the reward. That by giving God your best, He honors that in your life. And the stories can go on and on. There are so many of you who are attempting to live out the teachings of Jesus in your life. And I want to say, way to go. Way to go. It's you, the weird ones, who get to experience this holy happiness, this sacred delight, this out of this world gladness that Jesus promises to give us when we do it right. You are the ones who are truly blessed, and I want to applaud you today. You need to be reminded how blessed you actually are for standing up for and standing out for the red letters of Jesus. Way to go, way to go. At the same time, though, there are many of you who are also holding back from following Jesus. You're holding back from fully following Him because you're afraid. You're afraid of what that might mean for your life. You're afraid of what that might mean for your family. You're afraid of what that might mean for your work and your hobbies and your interests. You're afraid. And so you're holding back because you're afraid of where it might lead you. You're afraid maybe of even standing out, looking different, looking weird to those around you. And so I want to say to you, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. Don't hold back. Give it a go. To quote the esteemed philosopher and theologian, Dr. Seuss, why fit in when you were born to stand out? And I'm telling you, friends, you were born to stand out. Jesus came to this earth. He met who He met while He was here. He did what He did while He was here. He said what He said while He was here, so that you and I, we can have the courage to stand out. So that we can have the courage to step out of our comfort zone and to step into the life that God has designed us to live. Jesus left these red letters for us to make our lives better and to make us better at life. And so as I end today, I just want to give you a challenge. All of our campuses, same challenge. Number one, show up every weekend of this series. This red letter series, I believe, has the potential to change you. 8-week series. Think about this. 8 weeks from now, in August, how are you going to be any different than you are right now? Are you going to be any different? Are you going to be the same? Maybe you'll have gone on a few trips. Maybe you'll have been at the cabin. Maybe you've been on the boat. Maybe you've been to some barbecues. But are you going to be any different? In 8 weeks, is anything going to be any different about you? And so I want to encourage you, if you are in town, get here to this place. Show up on the weekend and see what Jesus has to say about some of the most important things in your life. In fact, next week is going to be awesome. Phil's preaching next week, and he's going to be talking about the Old Testament. He's going to be talking about all the stuff that you got questions about. Why is there so much killing in the Old Testament? Why are they allowed to marry so many people? What is all this about? Like, how does it all fit together? What Jesus said in the Old Testament, what's the point of it all? If you ever had that question, come back. Bring somebody that has questions about that, because what Jesus said about that issue makes a big deal for how you live your daily life, and you don't want to miss that. So show up on the weekend. Secondly, if you can't show up on the weekend, I want to encourage you to subscribe to our YouTube channel so that you can catch the messages, so that you don't miss a single one, because these are going to be so good. Just go to our YouTube channel, subscribe, and then allow the notifications to let you know when there's a new one. If you've got to go to the cabin, if you've got to go to a reunion, whatever, I don't want you to miss a single week of this. And then thirdly, if you don't know where all this is going, you don't know what to do with any of this, I would say make sure next week after our second service at all of our campuses, come to Crossroads 101. Because that's a great place to find out what this collection of weirdos is really all about, and how you can begin that process of following Jesus in your daily life. Because there is a weird thing that he wants you to do. And if you don't know what it is, you need to find out what it is. And it's going to be a hard journey for you, because it's quite honestly more comfortable to follow the crowd. But weird, following Jesus, that's actually where true life is found. That's where the blessing is. That's where the happiness is. That's where the satisfaction that you are craving can be found. But you have to be willing to step out and stand out in order to see that blessing for yourself. Because to experience life like few people ever experience it, we have to be willing to live life like few people ever live it. And so, friends, that's what this series is all about. Living the life God has designed you to live. So make sure you come back next week so that we can together figure out what that life looks like. Let's pray together. God, we pause right now, just so grateful for who you are. And God, that you love us right as we are, but you love us enough not to leave us like we are, but that you change us, that you create an environment of acceptance with an eye to transformation. And God, we are excited to open these red letters this summer and see the type of life that Jesus is calling us to live. That 8 weeks from now, we wouldn't be the same old person that we are, but that we would be different. That we would be living at another level. That we would be walking into the dream that you have for our lives. And God, we thank you for Jesus. We thank you for all that he did. But more importantly, we thank you for what he said, and that we can see it in these red letters. And it's in his beautiful name that we pray. And all God's people said, amen.